So we have before us two things. We have a question, at least one question, and we have a certain topic, and we can probably tie the two together. The question is that our philosophy tells us that we have to transcend the prophet-actor complex. And if you take it in a certain way, you could misunderstand it and say, well, actually, if God is driving everything and doing everything, then where does this free will come in? How can we make a choice? Is there such a thing? Or should we simply relax and let God do everything, a kind of self-surrender? And that's the language, of course, of devotional yoga, or devotional, the language of the devotee that says, I surrender. So it could be a kind of confusion, but we can easily use an analogy. If you're driving a car, clearly you as an individual are a driver with all the resources at your disposal to judge distances, to observe oncoming traffic, to make sure that you're looking at the road signs, obeying the law, that you're looking at the mirror, which is in front of you, and the side mirrors either side. And so you're doing many, many multitasks at the same time. And because you have done it so often, it becomes an automatic thing. Automatically, you're looking into the rearview mirror. Automatically, in the manual car, you're shifting the gears. Automatically, you are understanding the road signs and the route. Automatically, you're maneuvering the wheel in such a way that when the car veers off to the one side, you're bringing it back. And unless you're in India, you are traveling along between lines. Of course, in India, the main objective is for the car to be in the center of a line for some obscure reason. Anyhow, that's fine. But all of these become automatic. How so? Because we have consciously decided and consciously learned. And so the whole of our life, spiritual, secular, otherwise, is really a question of practice. Practice means repeating the same thing until we have mastered it. And then we have a definition of knowledge. What is knowledge? Knowledge is the absence of the necessity to repeat. I no longer have to repeat. I don't have to wake up in the morning and say, no, I have to remember the whole day until I go to bed at night that my name is the Swami Purnananda, Swami Purnananda, Swami. Or if I write a check, or if you write a check, you might think, oh, so many of my names went away. So I have to now repeat until it comes back. It's not like I empty my memory the more I repeat my name. So knowledge is the point that is reached when I no longer have to repeat the same thing, but as long as it is not settled down into the habit level, I will have to repeat something. And you can see how deep this repetition goes. Supposing I live in a house and then I change my address and I go home from the workplace, then automatically, without thinking, I'm returning to my old residence. I feel, oh, okay, so I have to choose a new route until that is carved into the mind. And Swami Vivekananda puts it like that. He says in his Raja Yoga that these new habits, these change things, because the whole thing is about change, is like carving streets or avenues in the brain. So we carve these new streets, and initially there's resistance. Why is there resistance in spiritual life? It's because new things are being carved, new streets are being made with new signposts, unfamiliar territory. And so it is a question of establishing what territory we want to go through and go to, and then making a conscious effort to follow the Chinese recipe. A journey of 100 miles or 1,000 miles begins with one small step. Generally speaking, it is these small steps that we make. And good teachers know that because they present the whole of the Vedanta philosophy in small pieces, small steps. Compared to if you want to see the moon, you first point out the branch, and then beyond the branch is the moon. So all of us, most of us, require these small steps. In the past, such great people, not just in the past, but such dedicated people, will immediately take a giant step to the very top, the most profound area. But for the most people, we take it progressively, a progressive journey. And that means we have to always keep in mind the principles. And the fact that as long as we are in the practice mode, we are faced with some choices. And these choices will be classified. Scripture classifies them as pleasurable or preferable. Why do we make such a distinction? Because of the consequences. The pleasurable is simply doing what every animal does. It might be in a more sophisticated way. Every animal wants to eat and drink and stream negative entropy on themselves with the idea, I should exist and I should continue to exist. And even biologically, evolutionary terms, it is called survival of the fittest, or it's called natural selection, an urge to continue. So if we take, for example, biological evolution and its principles, and we take natural selection as an observed fact, that it does not explain to us where this natural selection comes from. Why is there an urge to live at all costs? In the beginning, to struggle as a species, to know which side of the classification I'm on, either on the one who is to be eaten or the one who is eating. And so we find a biological hierarchy that comes from it. And we are intellectually dominating. Why are we intellectually dominating? What is the characteristic of it? Is because very obviously we have a free will or a free choice. Now philosophers will argue till doomsday whether it is an illusion or not or what, but it is our experience. And so the practical side of our philosophy that says, here's a direction. There is the pleasurable, know it for what it is. It will create a pleasure for you. However, if you repeat it, it means you're not satisfied. This lack of satisfaction will ultimately give us disappointment and pain. And so is it a good long-term strategy? Is it helpful for the unconscious area, the habit level, where we repeat it, and don't get away from it? Is there another choice we can make? Yes. What is called the preferable. And the preferable finds its own reward because the preferable is characterized by a lack of self-consciousness, a lack of selfishness. There's a selflessness. That's why Swami Vivekananda says, if you have absolute selflessness and you have absolute sincere truthfulness, then even if you're an atheist and don't believe in any God or anything, you'll come to the same realization as anyone else. And that is also called a revelation. So if you're driving a car, you'll no doubt make a choice. And all these choices are being made, some of them habitually and some of them consciously. For example, when you have to weigh up facts in a problem-solving exercise, what would you do? You'll get all the information, all the facts together. You'll weigh up the various options and you select the best one. That's a kind of mature way, a stand-back evaluation way, which says, I'm going to select the best thing. I'm not in a hurry. And so we have to be convinced that the preferable path will give us actually what we are looking for. We are looking essentially for peacefulness, happiness, sublimity, perfection, freedom. All of these synonymous terms are there. And we are told in the Taittiriya Upanishad, you have a whole section on bliss. And whatever you think is blissful to you or pleasurable for you, well, 1,000 times that much when your attention is tuned into the glory of the divine. So the subject anyway would be, let's see, revelation through concentration. And we have to understand what is revelation. So in this so-called spiritual journey, It is not that we are going to get something new. In the beginning, in our initial infantile steps, we will think, yes, we have to do something to get something, and we'll progress in that way. And our prayer will be, please will you give me salvation, or please I'm going to pray for this person who is ill or sick and so on, not understanding the position of totality, where everything is full and free and perfect, and nothing is to be changed. But that kind of realization will come at a certain point of spiritual maturity, where we realize that any prayer that is to do with a want is also a prayer that says, I haven't got. +1, -1, you won't get anything. At some point in time, there is a realization, everything is fullness. There's nothing to gain. And so there's that peace prayer that we use, derived from the Upanishads there. All Upanishads are preceded by a certain peace prayer that enables the study. And so, Purnamada, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamudachyate, Purnasya, Purnamadaya, Purnameva Vashishyate. Well, this is full and that is full. You see, if you have fullness, you can't add to it, you can't take away from it. And we have no idea what fullness is. It's beyond the scope of our imagination. But if we are looking, what we are looking for is already here. It's already here. Then all we have to do is we have to take the faculty of attention, consciously and deliberately, and tune it in. Just like if there's a broadcast and we want to listen to the broadcast, then we can take and tune our radio, our transistor into it. And we're doing it all the time. And when it goes off, then we get howling noises. We don't need a separate anti-God for the howling noises. We don't need a Satan or something for it. It's just howling noises. It's just our attention went away and was diverted. So revealing is a kind of discovery, and we have some examples in a number of different fields because we have access to internal creativity. When we release ourselves from the boundaries and strictures, this is what in neuropsychology might be called, when we release ourselves from the left brain and cultivate the right brain. The right brain is our artistic, creative sense of aesthetic side of it. It gives us a freedom for discovery. This is something we have to develop more and more. And since, let us say, the 17th century in Europe, in the Western society, we have moved away more and more and more from this sense of creativity. And so we have to restore that because everything now is to do with data. Everything now is to do with quantity rather than quality. So we have to boost up the quality side so that the right brain dominates. We have to use our artistic sense, our sense of aesthetics, in looking at the world and interpreting the world and responding to the world. That means we have to adopt a certain attitude, which is more considered to be anywhere between an enjoyable game to a profound game of skill where we have no fear of anything, since fear requires two things. Since fear requires at least two people. That's why we sleep so peacefully in a dreamless sleep. We go into, physiologically, we go from a waking state, the external eye is closed, the internal senses come out and have their play. And from a biological point of view, the sleeper is observed to have what is called rapid eye movement, a very high metabolic state, more highly energetic actually than in a waking state. And we can measure these brain waves. But then another part of the cycle takes place and we go into this deep sleep. And this is one of the 5 wave systems in Patanjali's yoga system. Patanjali's yoga system comes from Samkhya, Kapila Samkhya. These are kind of twin philosophies and a little bit expanded, a little bit different in 2 or 3 areas. So, what are these classifications of waves? Well, we have memory, we have deep sleep, we have right knowledge, we have wrong knowledge. And we have what we can interpret as verbal delusion, is how it's interpreted in English. What does that mean? It means we jump to a conclusion. You can have a funny conversation like that, I went to the railway station. No, I went to the airport. And there I met your cousin. No, I met an old friend from school days. So like that, you can have a whole conversation like that, where somebody assumes something. And there we have the glorious, glorious culture of gossip, which is the opposite of purity of speech. Purity of speech is an area of tapasya that we have to engage in. Bhagavad Gita gives us some areas of tapasya or self-discipline. And one of these areas will be physical, one of these areas will be speech, and one of these areas will be the mind. So in speech, we have to make sure our speech is pure, is uplifting to another person. Supposing all our speech is nothing to do with gossip, or nothing to do with complaint, or nothing to do with anything which is negative, which is uplifting to everybody, and leaves every encounter, human encounter, in a condition of beaming sublimity, a sense of joy. Then, of course, when the physical body goes away, then on your epitaph it will read, he left everybody joyful. Everybody who encountered him left reformed, transformed. In a kind of organization where we are supposed to teach Vedanta not just as a practical philosophy, but its practical implementation that we call yoga, then it should leave somebody transformed, not just information transfer that you can get from any medium. You can get it nowadays. You just go into the YouTube, you go into Google, you can get as much information as you like, not like the old-fashioned days. You had to laboriously write your difficulty down, take it to a library, look for the material that you wanted, pour through it. You weren't allowed to do anything more with it. You had to maintain a silence. You had to do your research. You had to go away. Study was like that. Even today at universities, it's like that too. But you can get as much information as you want with the click of a switch. This is how technology has transformed our information sector. But information has no validity unless it gives you some meaning, some understanding, unless it goes to the heart and you're able to implement something that has a transformative effect on your life. Some formula that deals with the common issues of stress, difficulties, problems, difficult reactions, and so on. Negativity in general. So we are revealing something that is already there, a discovery. Einstein was really a person who, and people try to follow his methods now, he simply took a problem and he pondered on the problem with a questioning attitude and was liberal enough, creative enough to look at things from an unusual direction, to create an extraordinary scenario out of the ordinary, an unrealistic scenario out of the ordinary. Put somebody in a spaceship, put them in an elevator and see, what is happening there. Supposing this, supposing that. With all of these supposings, he was able to do some remarkable things. And simply with these extraordinary ideas, he was able to break the mold and solve a problem, because in the kind of modern language, able to think outside the box, able to break the constraints, able to tap into a creativity. Now, where is that creativity coming from? The creativity is coming from a cosmic mind. It is coming from the same area, potential area of deep sleep. It is coming from that potential area that then evolves, as it were, comes to us. When we make a discovery, we say, it came to me. But one characteristic we know, it doesn't come from outside. It's not like a bomb that hits you. It's not like a lightning bolt that strikes you. Or I curse him, a lightning bolt goes off there. Or I bless him, a dove goes off from your head opens up and a dove flows out. Not like that. So what we know is that the pondering, the questioning, is the first part of your journey. And that is why if you want a good speaker, there are many YouTube people, Swamis and so on, who are extraordinary speakers. But question and answer, it starts with your questioning. And the questioning means, I really want to know the answer. It's not casual questioning. And spirituality has no room for casual questioning, where before the answer is given, you're onto a different subject. You're just being polite, making polite conversation, just a mere superficial curiosity. The curiosity has to be there, but it has to be a curiosity that goes deep. Now, the beauty about the basis of Vedanta, namely the Upanishads, is this questioning is taking place. We can't accept some old things, some standard things. It assumes that the answer lies somewhere, that it is already there. All the difficult questions, the answer somehow is there. And we know that the process is internal. And so by making these thought experiments, we can come to some unusual positions. Now, we have gone a little bit overboard in modern science, because now we have added to the confusion and forgotten that the solutions have certain characteristics. Because the answer is usually in investigating the possibility of simplicity and causality. We look for what is the cause of this and what is the cause of that, and we go back. And the cause by its nature will be more subtle and more immense and more generalized, more universal. And Swami Vivekananda, even in his day, tells us, if we know the fundamental one thing from which all chemical elements come from, we've discovered the whole chemistry, and we know what it is. It is called hydrogen. From hydrogen, the whole of the periodic table is given to us. If we know the fundamental energy, we know all things made from energy. And long, long back, the ancient scientists of the Orient, of India, had established there is only one energy, there is only one material field, we call it Akasha, and there is only one energy that acts on it, and we call this prana. The pranayama has nothing to do with breath. It just happens that the thing that is moving us and creating a life is that which is moving the diaphragm muscle, a kind of piston that enables inhalation and exhalation. And by mastering that prana there, we are also mastering the subtle energy which is there, which comes out in its subtlest and most causal form as a coiled up thing, potential thing that uncoils, something that is kundali, something that is coiled up, and we can put it as feminine kundalini, and that awakens different levels of consciousness. Tantric language for it would be chakras. So it is to be found, the causes to be found internally. It is simpler, not more complex, and it is characteristic of a unity, a generalization, highest generalization. How is it that these ancient scientists and thinkers and philosophers and mystics and saints were able to discover all the things in the universe? Because the Vedas themselves are said to be, in totality, are said to be Shruti, eternal, perennial. Even the Karma Kanda portion, even the portion about the Samhitas, the songs of praises and so on. So there's a very interesting book. It's called Vedic Physics. And the author will tell us that there is evidence from his point of view that the whole of modern physics today, not modern interpretations, but the elements of modern physics is to be found in the words of the Vedas, not in the language which is familiar to us, but in Vedic language. For example, gives us an example. Avi means a sheep. And his interpretation, understanding of it, in the context given in the Vedas, would be, it must be a particle. It's given the name of an animal because the kind of particle that it is closely resembles the field. It closely resembles the characteristics of that in nature. Gramya particles is another example. Gramya particles are divided into 4 types. Aja meaning a goat, Avi meaning a sheep, Ashva meaning horse, Gau meaning cow, and it's again described, of course, in the Purusha hymn. From that, horses were born who have teeth on both sides. From that, cows were born. From that, goats and sheep were born, like that. And you'd think, why these particular animals? Then when you see the context of it, you'll understand. So the author says it's important to note here that only these 4 domestic animals will find repeated mention in the Rig Veda. Cat, for example, isn't mentioned in the Vedas. The cows are hidden in the mountains, and horses drive the chariots of the divine forces. And wool of sheep is used to strain soma juice, and goat is the vehicle of the pusha, and all of these things are mentioned. That's restricted only to those animals. So according to this understanding, all of these have a precise scientific meaning. And the choice of those particular 4 animals to represent 4 gramya particles isn't actually arbitrary. Aja means not born. And sometimes Aja is also referred to as Ekaja, meaning once born. Eka, once. Aja is the intermediate step during the transformation of energy into particle. And so Aja is actually localized energy. Aja is almost like energy, and that's why it was given the name not born, because energy is not born. Ask any scientist, please tell me, what is energy? They won't be able to tell you. Nobody can give a definition of what energy is. They just know what it does. And there are different types of it. Potential energy, kinetic energy, radiational energy, and then there's electromagnetic energy, and possibly there's also nuclear energy, all these different types. But these ancient scientists would have known that. They would have known that Akasha is sitting there, Prana is sitting there, Akasha is potential energy, and Vayu is kinetic energy. They understood that when you take a string and you see, okay, it's potential, and then that goes into kinetic and back to potential and so on. They know that that causes friction, and friction causes radiation. They knew that. There was electricity and magnetism. The only thing is they didn't combine these 2 into one. And they left out the nuclear forces, which probably are electrical energy anyway. We don't exactly know. So how is it that these ancient people were able to make these discoveries with no apparent scientific equipment? No microscopes, no telescopes, no James Webb telescope, no Large Hadron Colliders. None of this modern equipment, so sophisticated, was there. How did they manage to reveal the truths, both scientific and, more importantly, spiritual? The Mundaka Upanishad, this question is then asked, you see. Kasmin no bhagava vidyate. What is that? By knowing which we can make known everything. What is that fundamental generalization from which we'll get everything? It's assumed that if we know the substance of something, we know the whole thing. And the investigation therefore begins not with the ends of the cosmos, not with the Large Hadron Collider. The investigation belongs to what am I? And that is becoming evident more and more because we find the Australian the Australian neurophysicist asking this question, David Chalmers. It's not really a question, it's a statement, the hard question of consciousness. The hard question of consciousness, because you're starting from the outside. You're not trying to go from the outside to the inside. You're trying to go from the outside and trying to find the solution on the outside, so-called. For convenience sake, we can say outside, inside. The inside is completely ignored. You cannot quantify love. How many buckets of love do you want? You can't quantify the qualia, the subjective experiences that you have. And yet every scientist will want to do so and make everything data-orientated. But in reality, it doesn't apply to their family, their children, their loved ones, and so on. Something completely different. So that question is asked. Let us find the substance behind every name and form, just as you cannot have gold and a ring, or you cannot have clay and a pot, or and an ornament. So the substance is clay, it will always be clay. Gold is gold, it doesn't matter what malleable form you give it. You can make it into a ring or a bracelet or whatever it is, it's still gold. You can melt it down into a bar. And so this question is asked. What is that through which, if it is known, everything else becomes no? And the answer is curious. It says, well, there are two kinds of knowledge. There is Aparavidya and Aparavidya. Aparavidya includes all the scriptures. Paravidya is the higher knowledge. The lower knowledge is scripture, or the source of all scientific books, because all knowledge in those days will come from it. So it comes from the Rig Veda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, Atharva Veda. It comes from Shiksha, that is phonetics. It comes from Kalpa, ritual, by which you are able to manipulate nature and get what you want. Grammar is mentioned, Vyakarana. Nirukta etymology is also there. It gives us an insight into what was studied in the ancient days. Chandas, that is meter, Jyotisha, astronomy, therefore also mathematics was studied. All of these things were studied. But the higher knowledge is to do with that which is indestructible, and it is apprehended as indestructible. It's an imperishable source of things that are unperceivable. Then how is it that these great sages were able to establish these wonderful words? And in the Mundaka Upanishad, we find the answer. That same Upanishad will tell us about concentration. It tells us, using an analogy, see, taking the Upanishad as the bow, as the great weapon, you have to take scripture. That is somebody's direct experience somewhere, not necessarily ours, but somebody who's lived the way, who's made this investigation, and has, in fact, had a revelation through certain techniques and tells us these are the techniques we used also. So this we find in the Upanishad. Upani, the implication is sitting near. The implication is sitting near a teacher. A teacher, one who has understood the internal wisdom because they have gone through some realization. But what is the general method? Concentration. Taking up the Upanishad as the bow, as the great weapon, let him place on it the arrow made of devotion. Devotion means one-pointed direction. I'm devoted to this task. I'm devoted to the truth. You can also take it, I'm devoted to God. Then having drawn it with a thought directed to that which is hit the mark. Take your attention and relentlessly hit the mark. That then reveals all your directed thought becomes a method, a way of revealing what is already there. It becomes a revealer, an illuminator. Your mind is the illuminator. That you'll discover that which is indestructible. That's what we are aiming for. Our goal is the indestructible. And therefore, when it comes to free choice or free will, we know what to do. We know that going along the pleasure path syndrome will not take us to it. Om is the bow. The self is the arrow, the individual self. Brahman, that is the eternal source, is its aim. It is to be hit by a person whose mind is not distraught. You can't do it if you're caught up in ignorance, in the prophet-actor complex, thinking I, the passport I, am all that is, and people don't like me, or people like me, or whatever your position is in this way. Thinking in this way, you'll be distraught. Your mind will be disturbed if you do that. And then as the arrow becomes one with the target, this is called yoga. That is, the attention becomes one with its object. You will become one with that Brahman, one with the eternal source. Now, it's not that you will become one. This is the language of convenience. He already was that. This is a dualistic approach, assuming a step-by-step approach. So start off with the small steps. Small step is consider yourself to be individual, and your goal is to manifest this divinity from within, something like taking a bow, taking an arrow, and then systematically aiming. And if you miss, do it again until you hit your target. But ultimately, you realize that you become one with Brahman. You already were that. That then becomes a revelation. In him are woven the language of metaphysics. Woven, time-space is woven, a fabric of time and space. In him are woven the heaven, the earth, and the sky. In him also the mind with all the senses. All these are knitted together, woven together. Know him alone as the self, and pay heed to no other words. The great lesson. Any words that are distracting you, either your own conversation with yourself or that of others. So, he is the bridge to the immortal. He moves about and becomes manifold within the heart, where the arteries meet, like pathways, they all meet at the central place, is the idea. And the example given in many Upanishads would be like spokes fastened to the nave. Meditate on the self as Om. Patanjali in his Patanjali Sutra says, meditate on Om and or repeat Om and meditate on its meaning. Meditate on the self as Om, hail to you that you may cross beyond the sea of darkness, and so it goes on. So that means that concentration is the key. And then, of course, we have the Patanjali Yoga Sutras mentioned so many times now in these talks. And Bhakti Yoga Anushasanam is the first sutra which is given. What is yoga? Well, we can explain it as now. And yoga in this context means only one thing. It means concentration. Concentration. How do we know? It is because Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha is the second sutra. It says, yoga is the restraining of the mental field, the mind stuff, which we call chitta. Generally, consciousness, the mind stuff, external consciousness, from taking various forms. These forms are called vrittis. Now, there's a misunderstanding of that, because how do we do that? We do that by understanding that these vrittis come into three categories, and all of them are binding. However, one will be releasing you, and you know what they are. These are gunas, ropes that bind you, restrictions, limitations. And they are the means either to make a revelation possible or to keep you in the darkness of ignorance and pain. The dark side, the negative side, to keep you in the illusion, I am this, people like me, people don't like me. And all the kind of reactions that we can monitor and get caught in. And then we say, I have to go for counseling. Why? I'm in depression, or I'm in a kind of condition, and a distraught condition. I'm not a happy person. I don't find any joy in my life, in my job, in my existence, in this and that and the other. I find my body is a painful thing, and my mind is so disturbed. That's the condition that is produced by two factors. One factor is inertness, darkness of the most profound ignorance. And the second, that is highly dangerous, and the second would be egoistic position, rajas, a go-getter position. In both these cases, the pain factor would be ego. And I don't mean ego as an instrumental thing, because ego, that kind of ego, is a necessary thing to help us get out. It is the basis for our free will, for our choice. But I'm talking of egoism. That is, identifying this internal fundamental self with the instrumentality of body and mind. Not registering it as an instrumentality, but registering it as a person. This is who I am. Who are you? You introduce somebody, and then you say something about your job, you say something about your past, your friends, your interests, your family history or something. It is absolutely irrelevant to the question, who are you? Tell us about yourself. This is an assumed self. It's simply telling people about your occupation, your interest, not saying, who am I? It's not answering this question. These ancient seers, with a penetrating vision, relentlessly asked that question, who am I? And they came to these discoveries and conclusions. And it was by this concentration that these revelations came. And same thing, it was through this concentration that Einstein would have gotten his great perennial ideas, which are testable today and shown to be true in special relativity and some aspects, many aspects of general relativity. But these new ideas, new solutions to problems were simply ideas, and left it to a generalized testing of it. He never thought that there would ever be any trace of gravitational waves, since they are so subtle and difficult to detect. And yet, there have been experiments going back, I think, to about 2014, something like that, that very, very delicately managed to pick up from several independent areas, points, experimentations that picked up the same thing, that there was this cosmic disturbance of what was called two black holes colliding, and the gravitational waves were picked up in a very difficult circumstance, because you have to screen out all the other noise. And so, where does it come from? It comes from inside. It comes from this inspiration. It comes through concentration. So pondering relentlessly is to take the attention and fix it. And that is what is recommended by this method of concentration. And you may say, but yoga applies to other things too, isn't it? Yes. So if we take 4 general yoga paths, Bhakti yoga, yoga of devotion, because we have a feeling dimension in us, Jnana yoga, yoga of, discriminatory thought, evaluation philosophy, the path of meditation, and also the path of the willing, active, doing entity that we are so engaged in, most of us. And so, how does this apply to that? How does concentration apply to this? Let's take the last one. Now, today there's a useful catchphrase that people are using everywhere. I'm not sure if they understand what it means. Mindfulness. And you can use mindfulness in 2 ways, you see. You can say mindfulness, that is to be attentive, or you can say that the mind is full. That would not be, that's the general condition that most people have. And we know these various conditions. We know, for example, It's just like light is being distributed, it's in a scattered position. And then it could be in a semi-scattered condition, vikshepa, and then it can be in a more or less concentrated position. And then it can be in exactly one-pointed ekagra, one-pointed condition. It is this one-pointedness that we need to cultivate. Now, often the question is, in the midst of all my busy activities, how can I practice concentration? It's exactly in your activities that you have to, because if you don't, mistakes will be made. Suppose you absent-mindedly do something, let us say a repetitive job, and your mind goes wandering elsewhere. The chances of making an error are pretty statistically high. If you take Chernobyl, the disaster that happened there, it happened on night shift. There's a reason. So when attention is drawn away from the activity, errors get made. Now, what does it mean? Karma yoga, it means I don't care about the results. I renounce the results. I apply concentration, full application of energy, my mental and physical energy, to all the activities at hand. If I want some example of that, walking. That is why we have these labyrinths as spiritual journey things on pilgrimages. There's one great one in a great cathedral in France, and there's a labyrinth on the floor. We were recently, some weeks ago, maybe a month ago, we went on a retreat in Glendalough and found there was a labyrinth. And we walked through that. Now you can walk through it with the mind in all kinds of conditions. But if you walk through it mindfully, mindful of how the limbs move, how the breath is, what the foot feels against the grass, against the ground, how the air feels against the skin, the presence of the divine in the movement, the presence of the divine also in your thought, in the mental area. So all of these are areas for mindfulness, and in your normal waking activity, you apply the mindfulness in the present moment. The key to the mindfulness is I'm employing this very moment, and I'm not engaged in the future. The future is about results. What will happen in the future? No, right here, right now, and you can add a sweetness to it and to say, you're doing all these activities as divine worships, rose flowers being offered to the divine. What about bhakti yoga? Does it require concentration? Yes. It requires taking all your little loves and supplementing them, replacing them by the great love of that one. The great example of divine love is Radha, Krishna, how these are inseparable. I was asked once in the UK, you see, this whole picture of Radha and Krishna shows that the female should be subservient to the male. I said, no, that's not the meaning. They are two sides, they're equal. They're two sides of the same coin. They're inseparable. There's no such thing as Krishna separate and Radha separate. One is the divine energy of the other. These are inseparable. And it symbolizes this tremendous unity of divine love, which is there. Raja Yoga, of course, or Dhyana Yoga, yoga of meditation, employs entirely concentration, and it can be applied to all the other yogas. And then Jnana Yoga, yoga of, let us say, philosophical analysis, is not just a head trip. It's a search for reality, continuously discerning. And in that discerning, not just neti-neti, not just negating things, it's also seeing, well, what is the reality there? Something like a flow going through all hands, all eyes, all heads, everywhere. Seeing the universe as a person, a cosmic entity. So concentration is the key to all of this. The whole of spirituality is really a psychological process. Then you see, we have the capacity for absorption, for absorbing things. We have the capacity for concentrating. But these are normally imposed from the outside. And there you see it in modern technology. You could see a person maybe putting a jigsaw puzzle together or a crossword puzzle together, and how much they are concentrated on that, to the point where if you speak to them, they won't even hear. Supposing you have a Beethoven, not just for his deafness, but he would not be able to concentrate on anything else. He was completely obsessed by his compositions and the music that he had in his head. And making it his magnificent obsession. What is our spiritual life? It should be our magnificent obsession. And success is speedy for the highly energetic, says Patanjali in his sutras. Concentration is there in all of the yogas, therefore, because the mind becomes the revealer because of these three gunas. Revealing, just to remind you, means it's already there, it's already present, nothing new comes. It's not that something is to come from the outside and you're peeping, is it coming, is it coming? And failure for you to get a result means I need to change my method, change my books, read something different, change my teacher, change my religion, etc. There are analogies. The sun is always shining, but the clouds obscure it. When the clouds move on, then the sun gets revealed. Should we just wait for it? No. We should have faith that the sun is already there, and we should deliberately move our darkness onwards. Now, I mentioned three gunas. The neutralization of the pain-bearing ones will be what is called sattva. Sattva is the revealing element. That is what we have to cultivate. It is not just to be a morally good person. It is to be a completely selfless person. I've come across materials who said, I'm a good person, I don't need religion. No, that's just maintenance. Everyone should be a humanist. Everybody should be a good person. But if you want the reality revealed, something extra has to be applied. And so this revelation will come without technical instrumentation of any kind, because there's an internal search and there's an internal process, and the laboratory is not an external one. It's the laboratory of your own mind. The equipment that you have is your own mind. And it is to do also with observation, testimony, inference, the use of similes and examples, but above everything else, your own direct perception, your own experience. Attention is like a beam, and it becomes an enlightener when it's directed selflessly. It becomes like a laser beam, ekagra. It becomes a revealing thing. Just as in the temples, where no electricity was there in the older days, and so the inner garbha, the inner temple, where the image is there, statue is there, and so arti is there, a light is taken, and look, here are the feet, here are the limbs, here is the head, here, a darshan. Everything is a darshan, is there to be seen, to be revealed. In this way, the divine reveals itself, herself, himself, bit by bit, but the revealer is your own mind, your attention. The Vedas are eternal, they are Shruti, and there are examples from science where the revelation comes, and there are examples in spirituality in the same way. The only difference is the one is externally based, even though it's subtle, and the other one is internally based, even beyond the psyche, even beyond the mind. First, we get the revelation about the world, then about the mind, more subtly than the world, and then the spirit. The subtlety of science begins with the fundamental physics to do with the physical world, and then the internal world of the mind. The subtlety is there, the qualia there, the experience is there, and then using that to reveal the spirit, which is already there. And so I think that is 9 o'clock now, so we'll finish off like that. So what is the practical implication? We finish off like that. We develop concentration. That is our cultivating aspect. That is what we should cultivate. We should take our attention and use it like a beam. And the more we are able to do that, the more it gets revealed. So with those few words, we leave it there. Of course, I'm always open to questions. So if there are no questions, no answers.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Not, and this isn't to be negative in any way, but just out of curiosity, is there, if you feel like you have, shall we say, like your ability to make steps on that 1,000-step journey has gone back, you can obviously still move forward, but you're hindered a little bit. Does that kind of does that determine your lifelong ability to get better at it? Or is it like, can that memory kind of be diminished so that you can get better at taking the next step, if that makes sense?
Well, we can use the analogy of climbing up a mountain. Let's make it easy for ourselves. The mountain has steps. All right. So we can take 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, So you're right. Every step back will be something like a delaying factor. But the point is that Vedanta asserts very clearly, because we use the analogy of a mountain, but the reality of it is actually that we are this whole thing. There is no separation between the top and the bottom and so on and so forth. That becomes our ultimate realization.
Mm.
It's a bit like thinking that we want to climb a mountain, at the top is obscured by a cloud. And we don't know what's beyond the cloud, but there's an urge to do it. Now, the urge might be quite subtle in the sense that we all have the urge. And it comes in the form of this survival urge. If you ask what is natural selection, it means we have the urge toward perfection, and every creature has it, even a bacteria has it. It wants to exist, but it also wants to live under better living conditions, and it learns to do it. Mm-hmm. And so we have learned in our evolutionary process to increase and improve our conditions, you would think anyway. Apart from war and all that, which is severely a sense backward overall for us culturally. But the urge to move forward, the urge to do better, the urge for perfection is there. And because of that, there is a reason why it's there, because the perfection within us is attempting to unfold, is pushing us to unfold. We can even think that it is pushing us from inside, and we are being magnetically drawn from the other side. And so every atom will find its own freedom in our system. Mm-hmm. So every animal will find its own freedom. We're not talking about time, because we evaluate time according to our feeling about time. We forget about that. It's not like improving in your career or something like that. Not like that. So we may begin like that, of course, but sooner or later we realize it's not like that. Mm-hmm. It's to enjoy the journey, knowing fully that the flora and fauna around on the mountain climb, the steps themselves, and the top, which is indescribable because we cannot see it, it's hidden by a cloud. All of this is actually the same entity. Mm-hmm. And Krishna gives a simpler example. You climb the stairs up to a building and you get to the roof. Now you have to imagine roofs in Indian context where there are flat roofs, and drainage from the flat roof. You can hang your washing on the flat roof and so on. But when you get to the top, you realize the roof, the stairs, every item, the wall, everything is the same material, made from the same material. It is all actually divine. That realization dawns. And even when climbing, that realization will dawn, that it's all provided.
Mm-hmm.
There's a song, Manucharo, it's a Bengali song, but there's a song that Naran first sang to Ramakrishna. And it translated means, "Oh, my mind, why do you linger in a foreign land? Why don't you go home?" Now, if you're comparing it to climbing a mountain, well, there will be good, or a journey, there will be good rest houses on the way in the form of holy company, scripture, and so on. But beware, there are robbers. It is the robbers that will put you a few steps down.
Mm-hmm.
What are these robbers? Well, doubt and fear and lust and greed and jealousy, and all of these. Many robbers are there. And these robbers are characterized by rajas and tamas. In fact, there's a story like that about 3 robbers. A man journeys, he gets robbed. Tamas wants to kill the man, rob it and kill him. Raja says, no, we just tie him up. And Sattva comes back, unties him, escorts him back to his home, but then moves on because the police will also catch him. So, because he's also a robber. But it is through this cultivation of the Sattva that we combat the other 2. Instead of killing, instead of tying up, it releases you. And so that's the process. This is our way forward, cultivating noble thoughts, noble actions of the highest, most selfless kind, and of the truest kind. That constitutes purity.
Mm-hmm.
Purity is the absence of egoism, essentially. And that is our big obstacle. And it comes under the reign of the mother of all obstacles, which is ignorance. Ignorance, not intellectual ignorance, but ignorance of the absence of knowledge, not understanding what is the truth of the totality, relying only on the superficial waves that we observe through the senses. So we get used to understanding that, firstly by understanding the principles of it, but more importantly, understanding the practices that will create this revelation, and that comes under the general heading of concentration.
Thank you.
If you concentrate well, you'll pass your exams. Those who have a dispersion, let me play here, let me do that. I'll study when I feel like it, and so on and so forth. I don't think they have a good chance of passing the exam. But it should be a joy, by the way. Why should it be a joy? Because you're playing with the divine. It is only the divine there. There's nothing else except the divine. And so it becomes your company on your journey. It becomes your confidant when you do take a few steps backwards. Taking a few steps backwards, if it's in the category of error, it is a useful thing because we learn from error. We should all make mistakes. It is only by mistakes that we learn. We shouldn't beat ourselves up about it, as long as we go back to our resolve and continue our journey. All right. Om Shanti.
Thank you.
Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be on them. Thanks.